This is Connected, sharing our stories and bringing colleagues together across NSS.
Hello everyone, the warmest of welcomes to this, our very first episode of Connected. I'm Richard Pigeon, and alongside me today in the co-host chair is Lisa Walker. Together we'll guide you through our debut episode. Lisa, I know we've got a packed show today, but should we briefly share with the listeners what we're hoping to do with our new podcast and what we're trying to deliver for all of our colleagues?
We've launched the NSS Connected podcast so we can share stories from across NSS in a way that's accessible to everyone, no matter where they work. Not everyone at NSS sits in front of a desk. There are drivers, donor carers, lab staff and warehouse staff. We have people working in hugely different roles in different locations. It's so important that teams and individuals can share their success stories and their challenges, no matter where they work, and to understand the experience of their colleagues. You can download the podcast and listen anywhere, so drivers, for example, could listen while they're on the road. Our response to the coronavirus pandemic has meant we've embraced working digitally. New ways of working, like using Microsoft Teams, is improving how we communicate with colleagues, and we hope this podcast will continue to do that. Coronavirus is forcing many of us to work remotely, which can make many of us feel alone, so we're hoping this will be a more personal way of keeping in touch.
Thanks for that, Lisa. We're shortly going to kick off Connected with a wide-ranging catch-up with Mary Morgan. However, I know we've got lots of fantastic content lined up for our listeners, Lisa, so could you tell us a little bit more about what we've got in store for them?
Well, Richard, in this week's episode we find out what Lynne Willdigg, Associate Director of Donor and Transport Services at SNBTS, misses most about life before lockdown. She also gives us a behind-the-scenes look at the digitisation of the donor experience. Also at SNBTS, charge nurse Barbara Watt tells us more about what keeps her smiling behind her mask during the pandemic. Speaking of PPE, we also catch up with Gordon Beattie, whose first months at NSS have been spent leading national procurement's work to source and supply the PPE Scotland needs to keep our health and care colleagues safe. We set up a Teams meeting with him from his caravan to ask the important questions like who's the better manager, Gordon Beattie or Jurgen Klopp?
With so much to look forward to, it's obviously time to get connected. When it comes to understanding how diverse our organisation is and the value we bring to our NHS, few colleagues can speak with greater authority than Mary Morgan. Mary has been a director of both the Scottish National Blood Transfusion Service and Health Protection Scotland, having previously occupied various senior roles across a range of services. Currently, she combines her work as a director of NSS with her role as Senior Programme Director at Edinburgh's Royal Hospital for Children and Young People. But Mary recently found some time in her packed diary to share her thoughts on the changing role of NSS, her pride in the work of her colleagues, and her personal experience of life in a COVID-19 world. Mary, for the benefit of the very few within NSS who are not familiar with you, could you tell our listeners what your current role involves and how long you've been with NSS?
Okay, so I started with NSS in 2008 as the Director of Health Protection Scotland. And then in 2012, I became the Director of the Scottish National Blood Transfusion Service. And in October of 2018, I assumed my current role as Director of Strategy, Performance and Service Transformation and Deputy Chief Executive. So I've been with NSS for some 12 years of my career, which is quite a long while actually when one reflects upon it. My current role is actually really very eclectic, and I clearly manage programme management services and communications and engagement and marketing, and also the strategy and governance teams within the corporate HQ element of my role. But also critical to my role is building and sustaining existing and new relationships with all of the people that we would want to provide services to, and also to support the delivery of those services. It's interesting that not only do I fulfil that role, but I also have a responsibility just now as a senior programme director for the Children's Hospital project with NHS Lothian on behalf of the Scottish Government. So I act as an interface between Scottish Government and NHS Lothian, and to quite an extent also with colleagues across NSS in terms of the service provision that is there. And I think that relationship and that role sums up quite a lot of my overarching role within NSS. So, for example, that more than liaison, but delivery responsibility across national shared services approaches. So, for example, within radiology, within laboratories, aseptic dispensing pharmacy, some of the big programmes and cross-cutting pieces of work on a Once for Scotland basis. And also more recently in the COVID response, particularly to testing across Scotland because of our links with laboratories. So I've described my role in a nutshell as being the director of stuff, or the A&E response, the director of anything and everything that comes my direction, and also a key responsibility to make sure that our governance and our service excellence is a priority within that.
Absolutely. Well, it's fair to say you've got a lot on your plate then, Mary, but it strikes me that in terms of NSS being a connected organisation, you're very well placed to comment on that, given that you mentioned your dual role. So you're over at the Royal Hospital for Children and Young People in Edinburgh. In some ways, you get to see us from the outside to some extent as well. I'm very conscious as well that you're invariably seen usually towing a small case behind you because you're off to your next place where you need to be to do your work. So you're someone that's very much a partnership builder in terms of our external partners. And that piece you mentioned about the kind of strengthening of existing relationships and building new ones, I guess in terms of service transformation, has COVID-19 derailed some of your vision for how we transform our service delivery, or in some cases has it actually been helpful because we were left with no option but to work more closely with partners at pace and to actually streamline some of our processes?
Yeah. So that's really interesting, isn't it? Because although we've been in a state of emergency and there's a lot not to like about this COVID emergency, and the stories that we hear, I would echo, are very, very heartbreaking from time to time. But I think reflecting on the organisational piece and what is really positive about the situation is that we've had to transform our services. I don't think without this emergency we would ever have had the proliferation of Teams, for example, on which we're speaking just now, and the rate and the pace at which people have been able to adopt that change in how they operate and how we do our work, working from home, working from different places, has been absolutely phenomenal. I think with any sort of transformational change, you need to find a way of unsticking the organisation, and by unsticking I mean unfreezing it from a moment in time and really being quite disruptive to the ways that people have had and become entrenched in their way of working. Now, there may be very good reasons for why things are the way they are, but equally one of the ways of seeing new possibilities and new ways of working is actually to experience them, and I think that's what we have done around COVID. I think there have been changes made that we definitely don't want to lose. And equally, there are some pieces that we have lost that we really want to find new ways of gaining them back again. So I think we need to understand, what do we mean by transformation and what are our goals of transformation? Transformation is really about change. And the difference between a normal change programme and transformation is really the size and the magnitude of the change that has taken place. Now, that doesn't mean to say that transformation needs to take a long time or a short time. And it doesn't mean to say that transformation needs more effort and bigger effort. It just needs the right unsticking and the right attitude towards change in order to make it a completely new possibility that is being developed. So I think that we have seen transformation take place. The critical piece is have we been successful enough in unfreezing what has gone before in order to really build upon those new possibilities. And I think what we've seen around our staff and around our services is the ability to make changes at pace and to deliver at pace when some of the bureaucracies by necessity have been removed from us.
Absolutely. And certainly I've seen, even my short time at NSS, Mary, a real kind of positive buy-in from the wider organisation round about this change, this almost dynamic change that's been to some extent forced upon us, but many of our colleagues have taken it and run with it. And is that something that you've seen as well?
Absolutely. I was recently having a conversation, in fact, just just at lunchtime, I was having a conversation about perhaps some of the difficulties that people have been experiencing around all of the change and what people are finding quite hard, what they miss, what they are yearning for. But what I also pointed out was all of those things that are hugely positive, because actually where people are finding some things difficult, some people really love to be working from home. They found new ways of delivering their services. I'm sure there's been lots of people who have been very, very much more productive. And actually people have found resources within themselves that they possibly never thought they would be able to find to work through problems that have been presented. You know, for example, the speed at which a Louisa Jordan hospital was built is absolutely phenomenal. The speed at which we've managed to introduce new services, testing, for example, completely new service that started really from scratch from the 3rd of April. I'm talking about the UK government introduction into Scotland, is absolutely phenomenal. And there are many more examples of that. It's how we capture what has gone well in that and take that forward with us into a new way of being and a new way of organising ourselves.
I suppose that creating and delivering these new services at this kind of pace has also been quite empowering for many of our colleagues to recognise, as you say, that within themselves they can, at a time of kind of national crisis, and kind of they can step up and take ownership of that as well. This podcast is part of NSS's new communication campaign entitled Connected. This was designed to reflect how critical our role is and how the work of NSS makes a positive impact on patients, families and communities across Scotland. And obviously that has only been further highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic. Do you think, however, that NSS is connected enough, or is there more we can do to identify and build successful partnerships internally and externally?
So there's always more we can do. We can always make the experience of being connected to others better and improve. But I have to say, I have seen us really stand up to that mark and what has been called upon us. And in many circumstances, we have been the very first port of call to support territorial boards, to support national boards, to support Scottish Government in their ventures to better provide services for citizens at this time of crisis. And I think it's only by being very well connected and joined up from, if you think about all of the PPE pieces, the connections into procurement, the connections through our facilities team, not just because it's an SBU there, connections into corporate and across communications, and also those links into well-trodden relationships, and across into DAS, for the IT infrastructure to support us around all of those pieces of work, that we are absolutely joined up together to deliver those services. Of course, we need to listen to what we can do better, but I think it's really important to focus on what has worked really, really well and how we have been able to stand up and move forward to the line to deliver things very, very quickly and very rapidly in something that we could never have foreseen to have been of this level of magnitude. If we think just about the speed of rolling out Teams, for example, or for addressing data flows coming into the organisation from a wide source of places, our links and support of the Scottish National Blood Transfusion Service in setting up their testing capacity to link into NHS Lothian to contribute to the national effort in that regard, none of that would happen without the knowledge and the connections that we have within the organisation and also externally. And that takes a really strong level of trust, both in individual people and in the services that we provide. So I'm not clear yet what we could do better and do more of. I think by delivering operationally in an excellent manner, that has built and supported the build of our reputation. And I believe that that will continue right through to the end of COVID and as services, health services step back up again to normal levels of activity prior to the winter coming in.
Thanks for that, Mary. So much of what NSS has been doing and so much of the work across the organisation that you've just referenced there has been focused on protecting those in the front line, nurses, doctors and all of our colleagues who are caring for those affected by COVID-19. Having been a nursing manager yourself at a busy hospital, do you feel particularly for those who are providing that care directly? And are you proud of the work NSS has done and is doing to support them?
Yes, absolutely. I was asked a question recently about about my role. Do I see myself as a healthcare worker? And I said, yes, I do, because I am a healthcare worker. I work for the health service. And then I was asked, do you have direct contact with patients? And I think sometimes people see healthcare workers or healthcare employees as being those people who have direct frontline experience, as you spoke about, in accident emergency, intensive care units, in wards, or indeed as frontline in care homes. And also I reflected recently on the people who have run towards the direct COVID effort. So testing, Louisa Jordan, the testing service, the PPE work, all of those essential components of our response to COVID, and very much our own teams within NSS standing up, working long hours, and really experiencing what it is like to have to work at pace. And I recently put a big thank you out to all of those staff for doing that, for giving of themselves and from laying their own personal needs to one side. But I also wanted to thank specifically all of those people who have continued to work, keeping the lights on in our business as usual services so that we are ready to relaunch and restart our core services, which I don't think have ever really stopped. I think what has happened is that they may not have been at the forefront of the press and of the media and at the forefront of the COVID response, but nevertheless, without those services continuing as a baseline and as our strong foundations, those frontline pieces of NSS would not have been able to continue to work. And I think although they may have been unseen in their maintaining our core services, they are maintaining an exceptionally strong foundation, which is allowing some other people to support frontline services being delivered. And we have seen how critical all of those are. And I really believe that we're in a good state now to resume our business as usual activities in the next few weeks and months.
Mary, you've very eloquently there paid kind of tribute to all of our colleagues and made the point that some of us are doing the same role we did before, but most likely we're doing more of it. Some of our colleagues are being asked to take up different roles and have stepped up to take on that responsibility to fulfil a critical need. But all of us at NSS are playing our part in our collective national response. Now, Connected aims to be a voice for the unsung heroes of NSS, for those who make that positive contribution every day, but don't often see their names up in lights. Later on in this episode, we'll hear from a charge nurse at SNBTS about her team's work supporting donors during a lockdown. Are you looking forward to hearing those kinds of experiences from those kinds of colleagues?
Absolutely. I think it's very critical to hear what the experiences have been, partly because I think it's very interesting and we don't want them to be unsung heroes. They need to celebrate their successes as well. I reflect on my own experience as a nurse, and I remember one particular day in the ward where there were two very, very sick patients requiring resuscitation. And my time and the time of the very senior staff were being spent looking after those two very sick patients. And it wasn't until the end of the day that I realised that I had another 23 patients, all of whom had had their care needs attended to and had been very well looked after by the student nurse who kept the rest of the ward going, along with some healthcare support workers, then called nursing auxiliaries. And I was ever so grateful for that, because all of the patients were still looked after. And I think it's really important to hear how that work of continuing to look after what really is the very vast majority of our services, the 23 patients out of the 25 and not the 2, is really critical to hear. I would really love to hear from some of the people who would say, I'm just the domestic, or I'm just the administrator, or I'm just whatever it is, because their work is hugely valuable in what we do. And I'm also very, very keen to hear what they've learned and what we need to hold on to going forward, and how we can make sure that the experience in this new world for our staff and for our employees is really good going forward.
For most of us, the biggest challenges we face in our early days in a new job are to remember all of our colleagues' names, what our logons are for our computers, and where the nearest toilets are. But for Gordon Beattie, who recently joined NSS as Director of Procurement, his first days in the new role were concerned with trying to mastermind Scotland's PPE response during the COVID-19 pandemic. And Gordon has been managing all this from a rather unusual location, his caravan. Here's Cleo Comerford to tell us more.
Anyone listening will have just heard that intro. And I think that we need to explain to everyone why we've used the word caravan. Do you want to help listeners with the context here?
Yeah, my caravan is we started working from home like lots of people did, having spent one day, full day, from first thing in the morning to last thing at night on meetings, team calls, and my family couldn't even get in to boil the kettle, sort of going around. This won't work. So I went down and we have a caravan, an old caravan. We got a caravan, and I brought it up and put it in the driveway. So that's become a Caravan Central 8. So yeah, that's what I brought up to save my family listening to all my meetings and all my chat.
We've been talking about the caravan, Gordon. Just to help everyone listen to this podcast, can you just describe a little bit more about your setup to help us visualise what that looks like?
I've got myself set up. The dining room table's turned round. I've got my computer set up in it. I've brought in a chair that I can use. And I've got my fridge is just behind me with an easy reach, so I can keep my milk in there. And I'm really lucky that my wife and my son will come out and bring me cups of tea and coffee, etc. So that's good. I've got my little gas fire that I put on that keeps me warm, because this has been going on for some time. It was quite cold in March. Some of the days there was frost in the windows. I've got my router in, my broadband, and I've got my little booster signal box. So I get good Wi-Fi and good phone signal. So no, it all works quite well. Most importantly, I've got my 2 therapy pets. I've got my little spaniels, and they come in the morning and they stay with me practically all day.
Excellent. Most important thing is, where's the snacks and the tea?
Well, the good thing is I've got a fridge, and I can just sort of swing my chair back about a couple of feet, and I've got my fridge. I can go in, bring my milk out, and get my tea on and all that kind of stuff. But I'm very lucky that I'm not too far from my front door, and my wife and my son occasionally bring me out, pop food through and cups of tea through. So I'm well looked after.
I mean, how's it been working like this, given the huge level of responsibility you've been managing your time?
Well, I think like most of us, we're all getting to learn how to work remotely. We're all using Teams. We're all on that a lot, on our emails and our phones. So in some respects, it's been quite a good environment to work in. We can be very focused on it. As I've said, I'm not annoying my family, but on the whole, it's worked out pretty well. The upsides of it is, I think, we've all connected up amazingly well. And I suppose geography becomes less of an issue for us all. We're all on the computer talking to each other, and it doesn't matter where you are. You're all working together as a team. So I think that's been quite good. in terms of my actual office environment, I can step outside into my garden. I can sit on my front bench in the sunshine, have a cup of tea. So that's been quite nice as well, to get a little bit of fresh air and a bit of a break between all the hectic activity that's been going on.
I realise, obviously, you've been talking about the caravan, and your decision to work from home is not really just down to social distancing. I understand that someone close to you is shielding. So for you, on a more personal level, knowing that you've not been able to go into the warehouse, particularly as you'd have liked, what's that felt like, especially being so new into the business?
On a personal level, I really enjoyed being in the warehouse, meeting the team there, making regular trips round and seeing how everybody was getting on, and getting to know the staff. And it's something that I really enjoy doing. So I do miss that a lot. I miss the connection, seeing what's going on, getting a bit of the buzz, getting a bit of the chat, and understanding. Also, it's one thing I'm really looking forward to, is getting back to the warehouse, seeing how the guys are, back in the office, and seeing everybody face to face again. It's been pretty tough to not be able to do that, and I'm looking forward to getting back and seeing everybody soon.
I mean, doing what you do takes a huge amount of resilience. And prior to coming into NSS, just for listeners, you worked at Greater Glasgow and Clyde as head of procurement for, I believe, 19 years. I mean, what previous experiences maybe helped you prepare for what you've been dealing with the last number of weeks?
I've got to honestly say, this has been like nothing I've ever experienced before. I think we're all probably feeling that as well. I know I've talked to lots of the staff and other managers and directors, and really any of us have had this experience before. So it is unique. I think everybody's doing an amazing job dealing with it, and keeping the whole show on the road. So working in Glasgow, it's an enormous organisation, like National Procurement, NSS, and you get involved in many things. Setting up the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital was a huge task, and similar in terms of the pressures and timescales that are being expected of us. But this is pretty unique, The other thing I would say is, being based in the hospital, I feel really connected to the doctors, nurses, and the other facilities workers in the hospital, and very anxious that we were able to protect them by giving them the right equipment and PPE to do their jobs. So very much wanting to do the right thing. So I feel as though I'm really connected to the hospitals, and I felt really, personally passionate and emotional about us, to deliver for them, and we've done it.
It's been a serious time overall for everybody, but those that know and work closely with national procurement have the knowledge that there's a really good sense of humour and banter with the team there. Have there been any moments of like relief over the last number of weeks that really stick out in your mind?
I suppose it's funny, we were all on the calls, but the banter has been good. I think the camaraderie has been really good. People have kind of looked out for each other. Everybody's asking how people are. One of the problems I've got is in my caravan. I think I mentioned that I've got my two little dogs come in. So I've got two spaniels, and they come in the morning. And when I'm on calls and I'm chairing meetings, they tend to snore. So I'm hearing this snoring in the background, and snorting goes on in the background. I've got to explain to people it's not me, it's my dogs. So I think that's some of the stuff that's been on, and generally just people are great fun, and there's just a good sense of humour that everybody's sort of bringing along.
Is that what they say, Gordon? Don't work with kids and animals. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
You put the real test. So let's talk about how you relax. We talked a lot about your work so far, but what is it you do to relax when you get home? And I mean, am I right? Is it how many steps away is home from the caravan?
Yeah, well, the caravan's in the front driveway, so I'm probably about 10 steps to my front door. So it's not a great long commute that I can sort of relax and listen to a bit of radio or whatever it is. I'm in, and it has been long days. I think everybody, I'm not the only one who's been doing that. It's been long days. So it's the amount of time we've had off has been fairly limited, but we've enjoyed really good weather, and the garden's looking a lot better now. And we've had a bit of chance to take some time out. We've been kind of focused on the garden and making sure that's nice, and walking the dogs within the local area, that kind of stuff. So it's been nice being at home and doing that, and that's how we've been relaxing.
What is it you do in evenings? Is it a good box set or a good meal, or given the work that you're doing at the moment, is it just a case of getting as much sleep as possible?
Yeah, it's a bit of that. I think it's like trying to stop doing emails at a sensible time, and then having a bit of a break. And I'm lucky my wife's a good cook, so we have some nice meals, and my younger son's at home, so we enjoy each other's company. We do a few kind of online chats with my older son. We've been doing that kind of stuff, we enjoy a good box set. We are being Outlander fans, so we've been listening to following the Outlander series and keeping up to date with that.
Normally, out with these times, you'd be based at NDC. So, in your short time that you've been there, prior to all this, you'll no doubt have been privy to the football chat that's pretty common around the office environment there. So, for listeners on this podcast, for the record, what team do you support? And actually, Gordon, I have to ask you, knowing you personally on video chat and seeing you, how many times have you been told that you look like Jurgen Klopp?
I don't know what you mean. My favourite team is Borussia Dortmund, of course. I will not go into football in any great extent. But the guys who know me probably figured that out already. Enjoy the football chat. I get asked about Jurgen Klopp all the time. My wife doesn't see it at all, and I don't either. But I have had so many selfies taken with me. It's unbelievable.
Well, for anyone listening to this podcast on through NSS, we'll obviously have a picture of you as people can access that through staff communications, just to make our point. So what have you missed most personally and professionally during this time?
The main thing for me is just not having that personal contact with folk. It's just different. You're on calls all the time, so it's very regimented. I think you'll find that we're working this way, and you don't have the normal just the chat. They'll sort of pop around, have a talk to somebody, talk about something informally. So that's the bit I miss. I think also you're pretty much stuck. Probably you'll find it as well. You're pretty much stuck in front of a screen. So people need to get up and get out and walk around. In an office, you walk around quite a lot. You go out the warehouse. You're up and down the stairs. You're seeing if people are around. So that kind of general buzz, what I miss, and I do miss a nice portion of chips and a nice spicy chicken wrap out of the van at Candleside as well. I do miss that a lot.
I don't think you'll be the only one there, to be honest. In terms of just looking back on the last number of weeks, then just to round things up, what's the gift of hindsight taught to you?
There's been times where we have been felt under so much pressure. The team have done amazingly well, working all the hours as sent, and a few weekends ago, I said to everybody, look, we're getting off the merry-go-round. We need to stop. We're on it constantly. And we all agreed to do that. And we got off the merry-go-round. We stopped answering emails. We stopped sending emails. And we had a break. And it was fantastic. And the last few weekends, that's what we've been doing. And I wish we'd done that earlier. So I hope going forward, people, that's one thing we do is I'll make sure we take the breaks, take our holidays, and try and switch off and take some downtime. Because we need it. You need to recharge your batteries and keep yourself right.
Absolutely. And you're talking there about weekends and holidays. When we do come out of this period and we are kind of safe to resume holidays or have our weekends without looking at our emails and our work and move more freely, I guess, what would be your weekend plans or holiday plans that you're looking forward to right now?
Well, it may not involve the caravan. I don't know. I don't know if my fans are going away in the caravan, but yeah, we'll go away somewhere in the caravan. I actually, in my spare time, I've got an old boat that I like to go out on. So I'm looking forward to that. I haven't been able to get to the boat to do any work in it, to do the usual maintenance on it. So as soon as this all finishes, I'll be spending a bit of time down the boat and getting back out on the water and enjoying a few trips over to Cumbria and Arran and stuff like that.
That sounds fantastic. Listen, Gordon, thank you so much for taking time. And for listeners, this is now after 6 o'clock. Gordon has not finished his Teams calls for the day, which demonstrates how busy things are at the moment. But I really appreciate the time, Gordon, so thank you.
Fantastic to hear about all the great work being done by Gordon and his team at National Procurement. But with all that talk of caravans and boats, I thought I was back watching Planes, Trains and Automobiles, which, for the benefit of our younger listeners, is a classic movie that's well worth checking out. And also well worth checking out is our first deep dive, which sees Lisa visit SNBTS to discover more about the digitisation of donor services and the impact that COVID-19 has had on donors and on our colleagues.
Welcome to NSS Connected, the podcast that goes behind the scenes at NSS. I'm here with Lynne Willdigg, who is Associate Director for Donor and Transport Services at the Scottish National Blood Transfusion Service, or SNBTS for short. Thanks very much for joining me, Lynne.
Thank you.
We're in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, so today we've taken measures such as sitting at opposite sides of the room, over 2 metres apart, and we're using separate microphones. I think the last time we were standing 2 metres apart was about a year ago on my wedding day when you actually married my husband and I. Our listeners might be surprised to know that as well as being Associate Director at SNBTS, you're also a wedding celebrant. How did you get into that?
I was, a number of years ago, I used to be event manager and I love doing weddings, etc. And as retirement gets nearer for me, I started to think, how could I use my skills? I do a lot of speaking in public, I do all the media. And I thought, I would love to be a celebrant. I'd seen a wedding with a celebrant and I thought, that's for me. So I thought, right, do my training now and start to do something useful out with what I already do at work.
It's a really tough time for people getting married at the minute. Did you have any weddings coming up?
I did. I had 2 or 3 weddings this summer. One should have been in May, just passed, and I also had a wedding cake I was making for that. But yes, I had 2 or 3. But they've all been moved to next year, and I'll still do them next year.
And I believe that, as you mentioned, you were planning your sort of phased retirement to allow you to focus more on being a celebrant when you had the opportunity to apply for Associate Director at SNBTS. What influenced that decision?
Well, at that point, I'd been with the service about 18 years and I'd been a donor services manager and head of territory in a number of areas. But when this role came up, I thought, do you know what? There is still another challenge in me yet. I was excited about it. I was already involved in bringing in online digital appointments through our donor web portal, and the opportunity to digitalise the whole blood collection side of things really excited me. So I thought, I've got to go for it and at least throw my hat in the ring.
Brilliant. And what else is your job involved? So just now, one of your main focuses is obviously dealing with the pandemic, but also looking forward to digitising the donor experience. What else is involved in being Associate Director here?
It's a really wide remit, and it covers everything from how much blood we need to collect to meet hospital demand, from the marketing team who do all the above the line and the below the line marketing to inform those donors or invite them to donate and also call them in to donate, right through to the blood collection teams themselves across Scotland and our operations side, and then our transport. So the transport department that actually pick up the blood for collection from session, as well as dropping off the equipment and the supplies and the staff, and then taking it back to processing, and then from there taking it out onto the hospital site. So it's quite a wide remit in a number of departments, but it's never boring, it's fascinating, and every day is different.
And how long have you worked for SNBTS for?
I hit my 20-year mark on the 4th of April, so I'm delighted when I hit that. And you know, I feel very fortunate. I actually love what I do. It's got its down days like everyone, but I love what I do, and it feels it makes a difference.
And how does it compare to other things that you've done? Because I'm assuming you've not just spent your whole working career working for SNBTS.
Oh no, I think my career has been a little bit of 57 varieties. I have been a director of a complementary and orthodox health centre, used to manage and stage health exhibitions and health conferences. I've also spent prior to this, about 15 years being an event manager and putting on any type of fundraising event you can possibly think of. So from fashion shows to golf events to, bungee jumping when it was all the rage. But yes, in conferences. So it's all of those things I felt I could bring into the planning organisation when I first applied to work with blood transfusion, that was 20 years ago.
And what's it like now? So we're in the midst of a pandemic. So how different is life for you coming into the office in the morning, if indeed you are coming into the office in the morning?
Life is very different. Normally, I would have been. I live just outside Glasgow and I work from GCC. So I would normally be driving through every morning from Glasgow to GCC. But now I'm very much working at home and based at home. So my day probably starts after breakfast about 6:30 to 7 o'clock. I head through to one of my spare bedrooms and I'm on the computer most of the day. I seem to spend an enormous amount of time on Teams, but it's an amazing way that we connect with each other, and it's good to be able to see everyone I work with face to face. And I think what I have seen during this period is the speed that we are able to work at these days using Teams and making decisions quicker. So life has definitely changed for each and every one of us, and will probably continue to for some time. But although it's been hard in many cases, I think there's a lot that we can take out of it as an organisation.
And what's your work setup like when you're at home? You said that you've got like a spare room that you use. Do you find it comfortable to work in there? Have you got lots of interruptions going on during the day?
No, the only interruptions, there's only myself and my husband at home now, is now and again when he pops in, because I don't get a lot of time in between Teams meetings. He will pop in now and again to drop me off a coffee. But it's actually quite good. I'm very fortunate. We had bought a spare sort of office desk for my husband's office, and we hadn't used it, so he put it up in the bedroom, and so I've got a proper little office set up and using one of the dining chairs. So it works for me, and I'm very fortunate I can face a window and see out, so it's not so bad.
So it sounds as though it's very different at home, but still comfortable, at least, and that you're managing to work okay. But what's it like here at the Donor Centre and here at SNBTS during the pandemic?
At SNBTS, and particularly in donor and transport services, we have seen massive changes. Basically, every aspect of what we do has had to change. When it comes to demand for blood product, we've seen a huge dip when the country went into lockdown. Now, obviously, we've always had pandemic flu plans, etc., and these have been rehearsed. However, what we never expected at all was that the whole country would go into lockdown and that the hospitals would stop all elective surgery and basically the difference in other treatments and trauma and surgical treatments and entries into A&E would decline. So where we'd estimated between a 15 and 20% drop in demand, we actually at the very worst point went down as far as 33% less than we would normally mean. So that meant that we had to make massive changes to our collection programme. We had to pull some sessions, but also more importantly, we made urgent change to how we book people in to donate. We already had appointments for the majority of our donors coming into our 5 fixed sites in the cities across Scotland. But over the next 12 months, we were going to be rolling out appointment opportunities to all our community sessions. So we took a year's worth of work and actually we ramped it up and we delivered within 2 weeks an all-appointment, online appointment system.
Wow.
Now that wasn't just down to donor services, it was down to our IT, our DAS colleagues, it was down to our QA colleagues supporting us as well. So we, and all the departments within donor and transport services. So it was a huge collaborative piece that I am so proud we were able to deliver. And now every donor is by appointment only. We also had to change the layouts of every single session to introduce social distancing. We've improved PPE for our staff. They now wear masks on session. And we take the safety and the hygiene aspects for our staff really, really seriously because their health is important, not just to us, but then on going to the health of the patients in Scotland.
So it sounds like a huge amount of changes for yourself and for donors in such a short space of time. How are donors taking the news? Are they quite amenable to having appointments?
We've been very fortunate. Donors have embraced this. They understand that all the changes we have made have been for the right decisions, the right reasons. And they've welcomed appointments with open arms, which was slightly contradictory because prior to this, when we were going to be rolling out appointments in some of our communities, some donors said, no, I prefer just to walk in. But because of the changes that there are out there in the general public, because of the pandemic, they now understand that this is not just for our benefit and blood transfusion, make it easy for us, but it's to make sure that they interact with less people and are not standing in queues outside. So now we're 100% appointment only. The plan is that we will continue to keep that measures in place after we come out of this pandemic and any other sort of spikes that may come thereafter, because we know it's right for our donors. It also allows us to manage the blood groups that are coming in, and since we've brought in 100% appointments, we're even better and more accurate at matching exactly what we're collecting to meet the demand from hospitals by individual blood group, which is a win-win for everyone.
And one of the biggest changes for the general public is that all kinds of deliveries, so whether it's like takeaways, whether it's getting your Amazon packages, they've all turned into contactless deliveries. I'd imagine it's not so simple when it comes to delivering these crucial blood supplies to hospitals across Scotland.
Well, our transport department have been absolutely amazing, and they're taking everything in their stride. And just as they've supported us introducing bigger coaches for transporting staff as well, to make sure that we can get our staff socially distanced in transport. But they've also wear the same PPE. There's hand sanitisers in every one of our vehicles, so that when they drop off equipment and supplies to sessions and pick them up, same with staff, they can take precautions for their own health and well-being, as well as their colleagues in the public. The same goes when they drop off the blood products to the hospital blood banks around Scotland.
And speaking of deliveries, I find that I'm ordering loads of stuff online now more than ever. What is the best lockdown purchase you've made so far?
Oh, right, that's a hard one because I've made lots. Apart from the odd nice takeaway, probably the best one is I was able to order a big play centre. My some of my grandchildren had just moved to England a few weeks before the lockdown and didn't have anything to play on outside, and of course the weather's been amazing in the south of England, so I managed to order a big play centre. I'm not sure my son was best pleased when it was delivered in batches of big wood structures, at his front door, and he had to do all the carrying himself.
Yep.
Round to the back of his house, but and then put it together. But yeah, the grandchildren have had an absolute ball with it, so that's probably one of my best.
It must be really tough not seeing the grandchildren. How are you keeping in touch? Are they into video chat?
Oh, well, they're all young. The oldest one is 7, and the youngest one is is almost 2. But yeah, we do FaceTime all the time. But one of the best things I found is, just trying to play games with them over FaceTime and doing things like, you know, I do bake, I make cakes, so I've been doing more baking and actually doing lessons for them online, you know, facing each other, and then we show each other what our cakes look like and things. So they're loving that. But yeah, the first thing I want to do when we come out of this is go visit my grandchildren.
When you mentioned baking, I actually know from working with you a few years ago at SNBTS that you love to bake, and you used to bring in cakes to the office, much to the detriment of my own waistline. And you also made wedding cakes as well.
Orders have obviously gone by the wayside, like my wedding celebrancy. So no, it's purely home baking at the current time. And I think my biggest disappointment was my granddaughter, they were meant, and all the grandchildren had been coming for Easter weekend, and it was going to be her 4th birthday, and I had an Elsa cake ordered, and of course that didn't happen. So I've promised that will come out later. But no, at the moment it's baking for my husband and myself, and also our next door neighbours. My next door neighbours are great. I just leave them at the doorstep, ring the bell. so they're loving it.
Yeah, I was in dash and drop then, but for cakes. So I think I can kind of get a sense of it already, but what are you missing most about normal life?
Well, with the exception of obviously my grandchildren, I think you do miss the interaction with your colleagues. I am making my way around each of the donor centres to look, you know, so I can understand and see how the teams are getting on. And you do miss that face-to-face interaction, because although you can see people on Teams, it's not the same. But most of all, I'm missing giving people a hug. You know, I'm quite you know, touchy, you know, particularly
like tactile,
tactile person, and I find this 2 metre distancing very difficult. So yeah, being able to give someone a hug would be really nice.
Yeah, I want to give you a hug just now, Lynne. So I was in the donor centre earlier, and obviously they have a clinical reason to be quite close to the donors. But one of the things that I overheard them talking about, and that people may have heard on the news, is something called convalescent plasma. Are you able to tell me a bit more about what it is and how people donate it?
Yes, certainly. Convalescent plasma is, we currently take red cells and we take platelets from our donors. But the buffy coat, the buff coloured bulk of the blood unit we take is actually plasma. You know, it's the red cells that turn a whole blood unit red. And in that plasma, it has very valuable treatment for many patients. But also within the antibodies that are held within the plasma, it can be used as a treatment. Now, convalescent plasma, we're taking it from those who have already tested positive for COVID and have recovered, because they are likely to have built up antibodies following the recovery from COVID-19. And those antibodies can then be used as a treatment for those who are very ill and still have COVID. So we are collecting at the moment. We've been doing a huge of work around this behind the scenes, and we're collecting this so that we can get that out to patients, firstly for clinical trials, but then out to patients as a treatment.
And what are blood stocks like at the moment? You said that there was reduced demand from the hospitals, but are they starting to increase again?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we were 33% down on normal demand at our peak. That has gradually been creeping back up. We're currently in a thing between about 5 and 8% lower than normal demand as we start to see some treatments creep back into our hospitals. Once elective surgery comes back in as well, we'll see that go up further. And as we come out of lockdown, it'll go back up. But we've also been restocking hospitals whose blood stocks maybe need a fresher supply. So we are working on that. We're working to make sure our collection plan maps to the hospital demand as accurately as it possibly can.
So obviously changes quite regularly. How can people keep up to date with blood stocks?
Because we've moved to appointment only, I would always urge someone to go onto our Scot Blood website. Every day our website carries the latest blood stock levels. You will see, if you look at it today or in the coming weeks, that we're aiming to keep it slightly higher than the normal 60 level, and that's so that we're in a position to deal with any change in demand that comes to the hospitals. So we are aiming to keep it that 60s or slightly above wherever possible. But normally we'd like to keep between 5 and 7 days stock of all blood groups. Go on our website, check those, and then you can go on and you can search for where's the nearest place for you to donate, and you should be able to make an appointment for any one of those sessions that are coming up in the next 4 weeks.
You mentioned that there was some digitisation happening within the blood transfusion service. What are some of these changes that donors could expect coming up soon?
Well, we still have an awful lot of changes to come for donor and transport service, and some of those are a direct result of COVID-19 pandemic, and some of them we were hoping to make, but we're having over the coming years, but we were having to bring these forward for a number of reasons. And we're resurrecting in July with implementation in October changes to our on-session processes, which means that we will be much more digitalised. We'll be able to remove some steps in the process so that there'll be less interaction. So a donor walking into a donor session will interact with less members of staff. Which is always a positive thing, particularly following the pandemic. And then moving on from that, we're also going to be bringing in an online health check questionnaire. Every single donor that comes to donate has to fill in a paper form. Now those paper forms get sent out to their house at the current time, or they fill them out when they come in session. By filling this out online, it means that they can do it at home. It's, from a hand hygiene point of view, it's much safer. Or if they haven't had time when they come in, we will have tablets we can give them to fill it in, which one will be quicker, reduce paper, and also we can keep sterile and wipe them down. So, and that will be in by the end of March. So with the pandemic, we actually have been able to bring forward, but also really focus our energies to make sure that all the steps that improve blood collection in Scotland and blood donation in Scotland are actually coming in much quicker for the benefit of the donor, as well as ultimately the benefit of the staff and the patients in Scotland.
That's great. Thank you very much for chatting to me today, Lynne. I know you're super busy, so I'll let you go. For anyone who wants to keep up to date with current blood stocks and how to give blood, please visit www.scotblood.co.uk. For advice on working from home and staying safe in the workplace, visit the Coronavirus Hub on HR Connect. We're here today at Glasgow Donor Centre with charge nurse Barbara Watt, who's going to show us some of the changes that have been made to ensure people can continue to give blood during the coronavirus pandemic.
Right, so the changes that we've had to make at the donor centre start actually at the very front door. So we have signs up at the front door reminding donors about the restrictions and the things to be mindful of. We've actually changed the movement of people as they enter and they leave the building, and that happens straight away at the front door. We've created a kind of a one-way system, as you can see, so they're allowed to come up one side of the stairway and they must go down the other side, and that's all clearly signed.
In the foyer, I can also see a familiar face, but not from SNBTS. Kirsty Young from the National Network Management Service at NSS is here at Glasgow Donor Centre to lend a hand.
And they're helping to actually answer donors' queries straight away before they even get into the department. So that's just to remind people that we're at the present moment in time, we're only taking donors who have appointments, and also to answer any questions about any queries that they may have before they even come into the building. So this has been hugely helpful, and we're very thankful to Meridian for actually giving us this member of staff. It's made a huge difference to us. So it all starts from the front door. So we've been very fortunate that we have been able to adapt the foyer entrance here so that we have our socially distanced kind of a waiting area outside the actual donor centre. all mapped out, all taped off, and all safe and secure and all following the rules. And that just gives us a wee bit of room, because obviously we are restricted now and we're not allowed to have too many people in the donor centre. In the way in which we control the amount of people and the flow of the people when they come in, we've had to adapt that really as well. So this allows us a bit more freeway to allow that to happen. And of course, the information's online. We also remind people before they even come in that they must only attend by themselves. So again, there's loads of things being put in place to make sure that we have a tight control over who's coming in and how many people are coming in, and controlling that from stage to stage. So at the front door again, we have our signage there, so the donors are encouraged to read that as well. And then a member of staff will ask them the questions, going through the kind of grid that we have and the questions that we have. That is very helpful, because it means that as clinicians, if you like, as clinical staff, we then have an opportunity to have a conversation with a donor before they come in. And I know that for some donors, they're a bit apprehensive about, how we're managing, to maintain the guidelines, how we're complying with everything, about their safety while they're here. So it allows us that opportunity to have a conversation before they actually come right into the venue. So it's very helpful. It's very much a two-way conversation. So it's good, actually. No problems with that at all. So that person not only does the triage, but they also control the flow of donors as they come in. So they'll do the hand hygiene at this section as well. They have the conversation about face masks. I know that's a bit of a topical subject just now, but they also have that conversation about face masks with the donors. And we've not had any negative responses from donors about removing the face masks. And actually our view on that is an opportunity to reassure donors about all the measures that we actually have put in place to keep them safe while they're here, and actually educate them a wee bit as well about, cleaning their hands before when they take the mask off and all that sort of stuff. And obviously, if people are uncomfortable and don't want to take their mask off, then that's their choice. And if they choose to come back at another time and donate, that's fine. But we also do say to donors, if we ask them to take gloves off and masks off, that we will replace them if need be. Most donors have their own supply, it's not a problem. But again, we just give them that reassurance that if we've asked them to do that, then we can replace that for them. And actually, we've not really had any issues with that either. So once they've registered, then we'll kind of allocate them a seat. And we do have a bit of a laugh and a joke with the donors. We say it's a bit like musical chairs, and most people quite understand that. And of course, they're having to adopt all these practices out with the donor centre. So I think it's almost on everybody's kind of a normal routine now, to be honest with you. So they get registered, sit down, and then we take them individually into the booths as we would normally. That bit doesn't change. Where we do struggle, and I think donors sometimes don't maybe fully appreciate, is that it's not always possible for the staff themselves to maintain that 2 metre distance. Yeah. Certainly we're performing a clinical function, so we do have to be up next to the donor. And sometimes we do have to have clinical conversations with each other just to check things out. So it means that we can't maintain that 2 metre distance ourselves either. However, on the whole, I think it's worked very well. We've had to change our practices a wee bit as well, because obviously when donors were finished on the bed, they would move over to the tea area. So initially when we started all this, they were having their drink and their snack, if you like, their biscuit or their whatever on the bed. So now what we do is they have their drinks on the bed and they actually pick up their biscuit as they're leaving the door. And as you can see, we've changed the system in here as well. So we have one entrance door and one exit door so that we can keep donors, the flow of donors safe as best we can as well. Again, no complaints from donors, all very understanding, very accepting of that. I think the donors have done really well to adapt. I think the staff have been outstanding, actually, because initially, when it all came in, like the rest of the country, it was almost day by day, and sometimes hour by hour. You were having to rethink the venue layout and rethink what you were doing and where you were doing it, how you were doing it, who was doing it. But I think the staff have been very flexible, very responsive, and I think they've coped really well.
So people might notice listening that our voices sound a little bit muffled. That is because we're wearing PPE. You were speaking earlier about how donors come in and they're asked to remove their masks and remove their gloves. Could you tell us a wee bit why?
Yeah, well, we're encouraging donors our job is to make sure that, one, we keep the staff safe and we keep the donors safe, particularly when they're in our care, which is when they're in our environment, giving a donation. So it's a bit complicated and it's created a lot of discussion, but we want to make sure that donors have an opportunity to clean their hands before they come into the session. And of course, I think when we do that on an individual basis with the donor, not only do we have an opportunity to explain to them that wearing gloves is fine, but you need to take the gloves off to do proper hand hygiene. So that's quite a good point to get across. But I think it reassures them as well that we do this with every person who comes in the front door. So I think straight away it sends that subliminal message that, oh, actually this has been taken very seriously and they actually are really adhering to the rules and keeping everything correct. Then, of course, so the hand washing has been up and going since day one. The face mask situation is something that has evolved as more and more people feel that that's a good thing to do. And of course, I think it's been spoken a wee about, from a nationwide kind of a perspective as well. So we're seeing more and more people coming in with face masks. Creates a little bit of a dilemma for us because we don't want to create additional anxiety in donors. However, we do have a duty of care to make sure that we keep them safe while they're here. So that means that we do ask them to take the mask off when they come in, and there's a couple of reasons for that. We want to make sure that we can properly assess the donor when they're on the bed. And of course, some of the subtle signs that you pick up if somebody's starting to feel unwell will be changing colour, maybe the way that they're breathing, that kind of thing. And if half their face is covered up with a mask, then we might not always catch that. And there are such a variety of masks out there as well that some might be quite neat, but other ones are quite bulky. So the rule is, yes, take your mask off. It means that we can have a proper conversation with you in the health screen. You get a chance to make sure that you're okay and everything's fine with you. And then when you're on the bed, that we can properly keep that continuous assessment going so that we don't compromise your safety while you're here giving us a donation.
So when I travelled here today, the streets were totally empty. Is giving blood an essential journey?
Yes, it is, absolutely it is, and that's the message that's been given from day one. So, and it's on the website, it's on the Facebook pages, it's out in social media. So most people, if are regular donors, will know that, and I think people who have been looking to donate have found the information online quite useful. In fact, a lot of people have told us on the lockdown that they've been delighted to come and give blood because sometimes we're the first person they've spoken to in a couple of weeks because they maybe live on their own. So they've seen it as quite a social outing, and we've had some quite good conversations and quite good chat, and it's been quite good fun with some of the donors because they've really seen it as a chance to engage and connect and kind of touch base a wee bit with other people. So it is an essential journey. What we have been doing with donors who've had their home DSR and their call-up, we tell them to keep that other half of the letter so that if they're ever questioned or stopped, then they have that as evidence that they've attended today.
And what about you personally? Has your working day changed much, or does it feel like business as usual for you?
In some senses, it's become business as usual. We've had to adapt a wee bit through our working routine, not just myself and the staff in the donor centre, but especially the staff in the community sessions. There are travel restrictions, as you know, because a lot of the bus companies, train companies have amended and adjusted their travel arrangements. That has had an impact on some of the staff being able to get to the sessions and get home from the sessions, but also for donors who are, a big priority. So we've had to adjust and change some of our start and finish times to accommodate some of the travel restrictions. I did think it took a bit of a while to get us into the swing of that, but that has all steadied now. And I think the session times themselves at the community sessions as well, I think they've slightly adjusted them to accommodate staff usage of PPE and obviously the variety of venues that they have to work in. So from a working perspective, some subtle changes about start and finish times. Obviously we all need to wear PPE, which has a bit of an impact on your normal routine of things, a wee bit more awareness about what you need to be doing and how you should be doing it. But otherwise, actually, business as usual.
And for you, you had mentioned just when we were chatting earlier, before we started recording, that you had actually, you believe that you got COVID right at the start of all this?
Yeah, I was ill actually, and quite subtle changes. So at first I wasn't convinced, but did NHS Inform, checked online, looked at my symptoms, followed the advice, isolated for 7 days, thought I felt better, actually resumed to come back to work and then took unwell again. and did have all the classic symptoms of a cough, a temperature, and I did lose my sense of smell and taste before that became a well-recognised symptom. And I have to say, for all that I felt awful having to be off work, I've been working in the health service, not within the donor centre certainly, I've only been here about a year, but I've been working in the health service for about 25, nearly 30 years. And the support I got from the management team here was outstanding. I was very supported when I was calling in and even when I returned, so that was lovely for me, having to be off and at a time when you know that you're leaving them with a gap. And potentially you might not be the only member of staff that's off. You're always very aware of the pressures and the stress that puts on the service. So I was quite stressed out myself, actually, realising that I was putting all this pressure on the team here. But in actual fact, the team were lovely, very supportive. And when I came back to work, the management and the line managers, they were all just so lovely and so supportive. So, I wouldn't say it was a pleasant experience, but they made my recovery so much better.
Yeah, and I noticed that you're wearing a badge that says "We're smiling behind our masks." That's so lovely to see.
Yeah.
Have many donors noticed that? Or?
Yeah, they do actually. We get comments. It's one of the staff in here actually who made them up for a lot of the members of staff. Most of our donors know, and because you have some chit chat with them, and most of them know, that we're quite friendly. They know us fairly well. But we felt pretty bad that we had to maintain this barrier between us and them. So one of the staff came up with the idea about the badges, and it's well received. A bit of fun, but well received.
And there you have it, a fantastic look behind the scenes at SNBTS. Now, just before we close the show, we'd like to make you aware that in the month of June, is Gypsy, Roma and Traveller History Month, and we had the opportunity to catch up with our NSS chair, Keith Redpath, who wanted to share his thoughts.
Hello, my name is Keith Redpath and I am the Chair of National Services Scotland. On behalf of the Board of NSS, we are proud to be supporting Gypsy, Roma and Traveller History Month. As we go through this month, I very much look forward to learning more about the history, traditions and culture of the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller communities across Scotland. In addition, it's my hope that as a board, we will be able to find out more about how we can do more to support the needs of this particular group of citizens. While we cannot engage with each other directly in the way we normally can due to COVID this year, hopefully this time next year we will be able to engage in a much more direct and traditional manner. In the meantime, keep well, stay safe.
And there you have it, a fantastic finish to our very first episode of Connected. We'd like to remind you that Connected is a production of NHS National Services Scotland and is solely intended for our NSS colleagues. Lisa, any final words?
Thanks, Richard. I really just wanted to finish off by saying thank you to everyone who's taken part in today's podcast and to all our listeners. Connected is made for everyone listening right now, so if you have a story you'd like to share, please get in touch with us. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and stay connected.